Do you feel exhausted after a conversation with your spouse? Frustrated? Maybe even hopeless? I'm going to share with you 10 mistakes that couples make when communicating that are destroying their marriage. Hi, I'm Kelly Case, licensed counselor and marriage coach. I take marriages that are broken and unfulfilling and make them first class. This channel is for people who want a happier home but just don't know how to get it. Be sure to click subscribe so that you can be notified whenever I upload any new videos. Communication, oh boy, it's one of the biggest issues in marriage. In fact, it came in as the #1 source of conflict in my survey of married couples. Why is communicating with your spouse so dang difficult? Well, one reason is because we don't know what we don't know. People in our lives have modeled bad habits for us, and we don't even realize that we're messing things up. Most of our poor communication happens because we're doing things that we shouldn't do. And I'm going to share with you 10 things that you should never do when communicating with your spouse. Don't assume. Never assume that you already know what your spouse is going to say. Listen as if you have no idea what they're going to say. You might be surprised, and you might find out that you were wrong anyway. Every single time that your spouse talks to you, I want you to listen with what's called a beginner's mind or beginner's ear, like you have never heard this before, and you've never had similar conversations. This can be hard with your spouse because you think that you know them so well that you can guess what they're going to say. Sometimes you might be right, but sometimes you might be wrong. Don't interrupt. Never cut your spouse off when they're talking. I know this can be hard, especially if you feel like they're saying things that aren't true or they've interpreted something incorrectly. Just let them finish talking anyway. You will have your chance to set the record straight. On this note, I want to say that I have heard some people, usually the woman, talk for so long that the man never has a chance to speak. I've heard a woman talk for 30 minutes straight without taking a breath. So if you don't want your spouse to interrupt you in order to speak, then you're going to have to take breaths and give them an opportunity to have a response. Don't be thinking about what you're going to say, how you're going to respond. Give them your full attention. If you're forming your response in your head, then you are not really listening. You're preoccupied and you're not being a first-class listener. Never think about what you're going to say while the other person is talking. Afraid you're going to forget it? If needed, you could ask your spouse to pause for a second while you jot down a note about something that you don't want to forget to say. And then you could resume listening with your full attention. I would only do this if it's really necessary. Preferably, you will just listen and then form your response later. Don't invalidate their feelings. Never tell your spouse that they shouldn't feel a certain way. Feelings are emotions that we have. They aren't right or wrong. They are what they are. Just because you wouldn't feel that way doesn't mean that they don't. They're entitled to feel however they want. They're not entitled to act however they want. That is a different story, right? Feeling is different than taking action on your feelings. Instead, ask them, what makes you feel that way? Or try to put yourself in their shoes. Try to understand why they're feeling the way they do. Don't criticize. This is a big one. Criticism issues a death blow to your relationship and certainly to your conversation. It immediately evokes defensiveness or shuts the person down. It creates distance and the opposite of vulnerability. If you want to break connection with someone, the best thing you can do is criticize them. You've just cut off that rope of connection between you and them. The person offering the criticism often isn't trying to hurt the other person, but instead they're usually trying to evoke some kind of change. They are expressing a desire for something to be different in some way. It has been said that criticism is just a poor way of making a request. Just kindly make the request. No criticism needed. Because if it's done in the wrong way and done repeatedly, it causes a serious disconnect in your relationship. So don't criticize. Don't talk about anything emotional over text or email. The only time you should be communicating with your spouse over text or email is to say emotionless things like, can you pick up some milk on the way home? Or don't forget, Tommy's staying after school for soccer practice today. You should never communicate over text with about your relationship, ever. Don't get focused on a certain detail. Don't focus on just the specific thing that your spouse says or just the last thing that they said. Focus on their overall message that they're trying to communicate. What is the big picture of what is their point? Don't just like pick apart something that they say. Take a big picture view. Don't miss the forest for the trees. How can you know if you're doing this? If your spouse tends to say something like, you're missing my point, that's your cue that you need to zoom out and you need to get a bigger picture view of their message. Don't treat your spouse like they're making a big deal out of a small thing. Maybe it has become a big deal because the small thing keeps happening so often. If it feels big to them, it feels big for a reason. So rather than treating it as a single incident, consider whether it might actually be a pattern of behavior that is bothering your spouse. Don't expect your spouse to read your mind. This is very unfair because no human has that ability. You have to be able to communicate what you want and need, not demand it, but request it. If you don't say how you're feeling, what you need, or what you think, your spouse won't know. They can't be held responsible for what they don't know. But he should just know that I need more help with the kids. He's always sitting around on the couch watching TV while I do everything. No, he shouldn't just know. Maybe he thinks you enjoy doing it all. Maybe he thinks that you're handling it just fine. Maybe he didn't have an involved father that modeled that kind of behavior for him. So ask for what you need and ask in a kind and loving way. She should just know that if it has been 6 days since we had sex, that I am in need. No, she may not know. She might not even be thinking about it. Ask for what you need in a kind and loving way. Don't have an argument and then go to bed and wake up like nothing happened. It's important to process your argument and get closure. Be sure that you each understand where the other one was coming from and process what happened. You should never ever have a fight and just get over it. It sounds like a good thing, but it's not. It leads to festering resentments and hurt feelings. Sometimes husbands don't always need closure, but your wife does. She might feel hesitant to ask for it, afraid that she's just reigniting last night's argument. So never have an argument without making up. Making up is a proactive process that involves a discussion where you make sure that both people feel okay and ready to move on. My hope for you is that you and your spouse can learn to communicate in a way that allows you to be heard and understood. To learn more about communication in marriage, visit me over at firstclassmarriage.com. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share so that more people can view this valuable information.